Hello, everyone, and welcome to our autism awareness podcast called Spectrum Stories. I'm your host, and my name is Arav Sharma. I'm an autism advocate, and I'm the founder of AliHQ.ai, which is a communication platform in order to bridge the communication gap within families with special needs children. In our podcast, we invite change makers who are making a tremendous amount of contribution within the lives of the special needs community through their work. Today, we have with us Ms. Elizabeth Ford, who is the executive director of the 2M Foundation in Hillsborough, California, focusing on how technology will impact the healthcare space for people with an autism diagnosis. She's a co-founded Autism Impact Fund, Brain Foundation, and Charm Health, and is a board member of Medical Mind Incorporation. Elizabeth also produced and directed a feature-length documentary called In Our Own Hands: How Patients Are Reinventing Medicine. Through her work in the precision medicine space, Elizabeth continues to help shape the narrative around autism health to empower individuals with ASD to better understand their autism and what supports they need to lead their best symptom-free life. So thank you so much, Ms. Elizabeth, for accepting my request. So we can get straight into the questions. Could you share with us your personal journey and what inspired you to become such a prominent figure within this field?
It's nice to meet you, Arav. What inspired me to get involved in autism was my daughter, Sophia. And once I got into the space and started determining what the strengths and weaknesses were with the existing system, it became quickly apparent to me that the landscape for autism is ripe for disruption. The people that I met, the leaders in the field then, the people who were running the ABA companies, Bernie Remland, who ran Autism Research Institute and started Autism Society of America. Everyone was on top of what looked to be a growing epidemic of kids with autism. There certainly weren't that many physicians who were versed in how to deal with the complex medical conditions that these kids presented with. So I quickly began capturing as much information about the people who were helping kids, who were seeing real results, improved outcomes, and how they were making the journeys that they took so those could be shared with other parents. This is when chat rooms were just starting. Parents were sharing all sorts of information about their kids. The first genomics tests became available from, I think it was called Genova. People began sharing things about the genomics, but also sharing other information about their medical conditions, quite without really worrying about privacy issues because there was so much desperation to help the kids who had the most severe symptoms. I realized that with my background in marketing and being here in Silicon Valley, where I'd seen technology come in and utterly change areas in the past, I knew that technology was eventually going to flip the way we thought about health and autism.
Thank you so much for that great response. So could you walk us some of the key projects and initiatives that you're currently involved with, especially those that aimed at leveraging technology to improve the lives of individuals on the spectrum?
Sure. Our foundation is called 2M Foundation. 2M stands for Two Mothers. We started the foundation about 6 years ago now, honoring my mother and my husband's mother. That's who the two mothers are. But the foundation was actually an evolutionary step. I'd been having meetings, thought leaders in the health space since about 2014, when direct-to-consumer wearables and testing became available. One of the co-founders of my Compass group, which is one of our initiatives, is also a co-founder of 23andMe. Also, Martha Herbert from Harvard is one of the co-founders of our Compass group. She's an MD PhD who had worked with kids with autism from the East Coast. Andy Kogelnick, a bioinformatics MD PhD. Pramila Srinivasan from Charm was one of my co-founders, and a gentleman named Alan Rappaport, who started the first AI company a long time ago in Silicon Valley. So the five of us sat together in my house and said, geez, now that we can do testing ourselves without having to go through clinicians, let's start to build an open source, multidimensional, multimodal database for autism in the cloud, which is what we started in 2014. And when I told people slowly, talk to experts, I would go out fishing for people who had expertise around the kinds of different biological data streams you were interested in collecting. Like in the movie Field of Dreams, people just started coming. So my meetings went from maybe 20 to maybe 40 to maybe 50. And eventually we outgrew my living room and then we built this place, Black Mountain Lodge, so we could continue to do meetings. And I also have residential spaces so I can fly doctors and scientists in and they can stay with us. But the idea behind Compass was to bring people together anonymously. So I don't out people, I don't broadcast, I've never broadcast what we do. Deliberately, because the autism landscape is unbelievably controversial and fractured. So by meeting together, talking about gathering, data doesn't have a political affiliation. Data is just neutral. And data can speak to you if you can find a way to collect enough of it. So it's taken till now, 2024, to have the ability with wearables and sensors, with affordability of things like Apple Watches and other watches, to be able to finally put together a kit that we hope to be scaling out so families can afford it. We either give it away or find a way to make it affordable for everyone, because the goal is to collect the kinds of continuous longitudinal data and direct-to-consumer data on as many people with an autism diagnosis as possible, and then run algorithms against that data set to finally subtype that condition. And so everyone can have their own unique autism score. So you know if you're an immune kid, a gut kid, and the treatments, interventions that you run will be your own N of 1 experiments, and you can see if the things you're doing, whether it's ABA or speech therapy or a diet, are actually making a difference, and if they're not, stop and do something else. But then you'll also have ultimately a lifespan view of your journey. You'll have your entire journey tracked, time-stamped, and you can share that with other families, and then you can find other families whose kids look like you. So it's not just genomics, although genomics is important. Metabolomics, proteomics, transcriptomics, we call it motoromics. Now we can capture all these things, and we can do it affordably and at home without having to wait 8 months for a clinical visit. But you can also share that deeply profiled data with your clinician as a wave of data rather than a single point, and with researchers or pharma, and have a view that we've never had on health in general, but specifically health in people who've been given a diagnosis of autism. So we can figure out what is it for you and what can we do if you're a non-speaker to try to help you speak. If you have GI disease, to maybe when we cure the GI disease, you won't have problems with behavior. When we cure the subclinical seizures or identify the seizures, we'll give you a warning so kids don't drown in hot tubs every year because they're nonverbal and they have autism and there's no way for them to tell you that they're about to have a seizure. So many life-limiting aspects of autism get ignored when we skew the camera and look toward acceptance, which is a lovely idea, but we can't accept 40% having seizures, 30% plus being nonverbal, allergies, panic disorder, Crohn's disease, early Parkinsonism. All these things are realities that the acceptance theory doesn't embrace. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. We still don't really know what autism is, and we certainly don't know how to help prevent the life-limiting aspects of an autism diagnosis, but we need to be able to do that.
Especially what makes autism tricky is that everyone's on a spectrum, so each student or patient or child has their own set of strengths and weaknesses. So I was actually really amazed to learn about your movie called In Our Own Hands, How Patients Are Reinventing Medicine. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and what the plot is based on?
Sure. In Our Own Hands is a feature-length documentary. It was released a couple of years ago. We actually started filming about 11 years ago now, believe it or not. But the information that is, here's our heel. So you wanted to hear more about In Our Own Hands. So I was saying that we started filming 11 years ago, and I made the film because I recognized that there were similarities between autism and a host of other complex chronic conditions. And I thought that a good way to get mainstream interest would be to immediately start busting down the conditional silos, which is where the world's going now anyway, to show the commonalities between things like Parkinson's, GI disease, traumatic brain injury, and autism in terms of an understanding of the biological measurements that were relevant to each of those conditions. So we have the story of an autism family, and actually the story of Compass is part of the film. And my partner at Stanford in the Precision Autism Pilot, Mike Snyder, there's a Stanford magazine with this picture on it over here. We have a project called Count. It's the first ever precision autism pilot. So by that, we're planning on eventually having 10,000 people with an autism diagnosis, worked up 22 different labs, microbiome, metabolome, proteome, exposome, and you name it, wearable and sensor data. Mike Snyder is the king of what they call long and wide data, longitudinal data, multi-omic data. He's published countless times now in Nature. But he has been wearing a load of sensors and tracking himself for well over a decade, which is why I started chasing him. He knew nothing about autism. But he has seen genes in his own body turn off and on in response to getting a virus, immune genes. So I said, okay, that's what we call actionability. Because what he did when he saw his gene for type 2 diabetes turn on, changed his diet, doubled his exercise, and he turned the gene off. So this idea that people have that genes are destiny is just simply wrong. Genes are not destiny. Genes are the blueprint. What you build every day, the decisions you make every day, every little decision determines health or illness. If you can take that apart and look at the underpinnings of what's going on with the human being health-wise, the hope is that you can maintain health if you have it, extend life, a healthy life if you want to. But for me, the most important thing was to recover from ill health or recover from symptoms that were not serving you, that were essentially clues that your body was out of balance, whether it's GI disease or cancer diagnosis or seizure. They're all clues, but they're ephemeral. We're not collecting them in any way that turns that into a score for you so you can better try to maintain or recover health. And why autism would not be considered as a great candidate when physicians who've been in here call it the Everest of complex chronic conditions is because the narrative is it's always been here. We just need to accept it and find a lot more coding and engineering jobs for these people. Because what I'm talking about doing is really hard and really expensive. And it doesn't fit into the, let's keep just doing genetic testing. Let's look for that other gene, that SHANK3 gene. All of this sounds lovely, and it doesn't take grants away from any of the people who have been getting grants forever. But it's not going to solve it. We've got to look at everything, not just one thing. So that's what the movie's about, and all of the leading folks in the field, Mike Snyder, Eric Topol, Larry Smarr, are all featured, and they're all talking about the importance of doing this, and they were talking about it when we filmed them 10 years ago, and we still haven't done it. So that's the exasperating thing, is how long it takes to get from a notion, because this is not mine. Precision medicine has been out there, and the idea for precision has been out there forever. I'm just saying, train it on our community. Let us be first. We need it the most.
That movie sounds really interesting. Make sure to check it out by today or tomorrow. The 4Q project that you've initiated seems really comprehensive. Could you elaborate on some of its objectives and how it's tailored to address the diverse needs of individuals with autism?
Sure. 4Q stands for 4 questions. And again, there was a meeting here with 12 people in this room, and we're talking about the fact, and we were all parents of kids, and we were all in various, some people were in the residential community building space, some people were educators, some people were hedge fund people, some people were scientists, but we were lamenting on the fact that after all these years of working with our kids, we're still asking the same questions, the same 4 questions. What kind of autism does my kid have? Why can't my kid speak? What will happen to my kid when I'm gone, and how can my kid find work that's meaningful? We don't have the answers to any of these questions in any satisfactory way. So as a group, what we decided is we're going to go for a gigantic federal grant. We needed $1 billion a year instead of $300 million. And so we started nibbling away at those 4 questions with my whiteboard right now, which is something we call the Decoding Autism Project, which is designing a kit to measure the omics that we just talked about, create an individualized dashboard and alerts that go to your phone and a lifespan view, and begin to build the idea of an autism score. We just added to that project, Ariel, you don't know about this, with a proof of concept, front-end, agentic AI, natural language demo on the front end, so parents can just talk to their agent, instead of, I hate surveys, I've done a gazillion, they never give me anything back. We hired a group of coders to build something that hopefully will be a gee whiz factor that will be open source and available to anyone to add on to the front end to try to get what they call stickiness with the autism community. If you're going to make an app, if you're going to do something, and you've already done this so you know, I want everyone to want to use it every single day. So that means it's got to do something for them. If I'm going to ask something of it, it has to do something for them. But our goal is to get to your autism score. And none of that infrastructure exists yet, but it will soon enough. So that's one of our projects. We have another project called MOVE, where we're creating an autism motor signature kit to measure motor. We're working with some third-party companies who already have existing apps. They're using the Apple Watch and the iPhone to measure movement in Parkinson's. So we have partnerships with them looking at micro movements, tremor, dyskinesia, gait balance, and the Apple Health Kit. So we've got that relationship, and then we're talking with movement experts from all over the world. We've brought them here. We're all working to try to create a kit, so when a kid gets assessed, they don't just say 6 out of 10 behaviors. They say, oh, you also have movement. Maybe you should go into a spelling program rather than an ABA program and start to get trained on fine motor earlier. We have another one called Dwell, where we're trying to figure out how we take a stack of smart technologies and make those available to every residential community, even if the residential community is your own home, so that every person with a diagnosis can get access to the kinds of health tools we're talking about, but also communication tools, education platforms, so they have lifelong education opportunities. So that's a whole host of things that different people are building pieces of that we want to build. And then we're getting ready to do a project around food. So food will be huge because we're starting with soil and regenerative farming. And there's a real interest globally in examining the nutritional value of food. It's a huge problem. So what we do is we'll go out, we spend a lot of time looking around the world for the people to sit around the table to discuss a way in to a big topic to get to a data stream that can go into my dashboard. So those are the huge, ambitious projects that we get involved with here. Count is the other one with Mike Snyder. But it's taken a long time, but we're now at the level where we're actually talking with people who have enough private money to start to build what will, the heart of this will be an extensible plug-and-play dashboard that will become an ever-evolving software company that will change the way everyone does health. So major investment in the kinds of engineering that enabled Salesforce and NetSuite and all these other things. We need someone to build that and own that, because everything we're talking about will eventually plug into that depending upon what you want to know about your health or your kid, or how to have a successful pregnancy, or how to have a newborn where you're tracking everything from the minute. I've got new parents that are tracking everything. Their first diaper, pulling blood, doing genomics, tracking everything. That's going to be so helpful for them in the long run. But see, it's a totally different way of thinking about health. It's not the doctor's responsibility anymore. We're giving people the tools to own their own health.
I think all those projects, along with a combination of early intervention, can really be a game changer within the autism field. So You've emphasized really like natural language processing and really the importance of technology within autism management. So how do you see these technologies evolving in the future, and how do you think they can really aid to support those initiatives you mentioned?
So the thing about technology that I absolutely love, and I've been super lucky, and I think Ariel's heard this story before, but I got a chance to meet the Macintosh team before the Mac came out, was rolled out, and talk to them about what they thought, how they thought people were going to use it. This is back in the days when people were saying, why do we need a computer? We don't all need a computer. We have the IBM 370. But I got to talk to both Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and they told me someday everyone's going to have an agent, and it's going to make these decisions for you, and you're going to be able to cut movies on it, and you're going to, I went back and talked to my graphic designer office mate, and I was so delighted. I said, wow, you're not going to have to use the X-Acto knife, and you're not going to have to run type and have a drafting table. And she said, that will never happen. And I talked to my filmmaking friend who was cutting a movie at the Fantasy in Berkeley, told him the same thing. He said, let me give you the 50 reasons why we will never cut movies on computers. So I learned that people never believe, they never see it coming. Second group that I got involved with was Paul Allen funded a think tank at Interval Research in Palo Alto to try to figure out what people were going to do with the World Wide Web. So there were people, they flew people in from Sony and Samsung and GE, and we're sitting around a huge table, and we're all thinking, okay, what would people do with if we had this way for people to communicate? So we decided that we'd create animated malls, seriously, animated malls, and we'd have little avatars, and people might go in and maybe shop for something. So we're busy trying to work this out, and this young guy comes in and said, I'm just going to sell books. No, it's Jeff Davis. So I always tell people, I remember the energy of the math team in the excitement in that, and I remember the energy in that room. Health is about to change in ways we cannot even imagine, but it's unstoppable. So all these people with, we've got to do ABA, and we've got to do this way, and we've got to create, it's not going to look like that. I'm sorry. You either get on board with the fact that technology is about to change everything because we're going to own our health. We're going to know what's going on with our health. Or the tsunami will wash over you and you will be gone. And you should be gone. Because again, unless the system is serving every single person, the system is failing. And throwing more money at the things that aren't working isn't going to make anything better. So and that's why I'm sometimes an unpopular person to bring in. Because what I'm saying is, we have to, it's the beginner's mind. You've got to erase everything. Think about what you want, how you could help your nephew, what you would want for him, what you would want to understand. And if you're relying on other people to bring you the fix, good luck. Because even if you fix a 6-year-old and they're doing puzzles and everything looks great in ADA, and the ADA people are reporting, yeah, he's doing great. When he's 17, it's not going to look like that. Because whatever was causing the symptoms is not being addressed. So behavioral shifts, you can look like you're not depressed for a long time, but if you're depressed underneath that, the depression's going to come back. And the heterogeneity in depression is similar in a way, because you can look at depression and say, I'm blue every now and then. Yeah, I'm depressed. Or you can look at the person who's on 24/7 suicide watch. It's all depression. It's all autism. But it's very different for different people based on things that we've never measured. Now we can measure. So everything is going to change. So for people with autism, I say, hold on and be open-minded. Because even if you are, I hate these high-functioning, whatever, we're going to understand what's so with you and be able to help you with the things that can be helped to make you the best possible you. You can be free of pain, free of anxiety, free of depression, free of GI issues or seizure issues, or at least be able to identify when you're going to have one, only because we're going to look for the first time. We're not just going to accept, oh, you have autism. We're going to find the right job for you. It would be great if the world worked like that.
I also think that the promise of technology is also really tantalizing for us. Just for instance, a really basic example, ChatGPT, it's really revolutionized a lot of different aspects of society, whether it's like education, healthcare, in terms of resources and advice in general. Yeah, it's just really exciting to see the progression of technology. And as you mentioned, I don't really think it's going to stop in the near future as well. Yeah, I think that's definitely a great point as well. As a mother and prominent figure in the autism community, what advice would you give to parents and caregivers who are navigating similar journeys?
What I'm telling new parents is, and one of my staff literally just had a baby. And as soon as she was getting ready to go into the hospital, she called me and she said, okay, what should I measure? So I say, I have a list, and there's going to be a product for people who are thinking about conceiving. It's going to be available. I'm sure there'll be 12 of them soon that will let you measure your levels, father-to-be and mother-to-be, because now they're discovering the sperm makes a difference. They're discovering nanoparticles of plastic in people's testicles. So all of these environmental influences that we just ignored are now being pushed to the forefront because we can measure them for the first time. So if you're thinking of having a baby, you need to measure and find out what your levels of cadmium, lead, mercury are, because you're going to be shocked to find out how much stuff we have in our systems, because we're all a little bit polluted. We all live on a planet that's essentially polluted. So clean yourself up as much as possible before you conceive. When your baby's born, start tracking everything. So pay attention. If you come from a family where there's a lot of autoimmune disease, you need to be very thoughtful about things like vaccination. You need to be very thoughtful about antibiotic use. There's a lot less antibiotic use now than there used to be, because now we know about the gut microbiome and that we're killing all the gut bugs when we give those ear infection antibiotics over and over again. But keep great records from the very beginning before you even think there's anything going on with your kid. And once you know there's something going on with your kid, because the wait time, I just had a venture person in here with tons of connections in Silicon Valley, whose kid, it took him 8 months to get into Stanford to get an assessment. That's how long the waiting list is, because there are too many kids. The system is overwhelmed. Look at diet. Get direct-to-consumer testing. The metabolomic kit we're looking at is a wipe that you can send in and get all sorts of information about the microbiome of your baby. It's really easy to get when they're babies. Test everything you can possibly test. The results will come back to you. And then you can start to see and get analysis. So ChatGPT, but agentic AI is going to be great for looking at all of the literature out there. There are 17 different toxins from gut bugs that seem to indicate that a person is going to end up with some sort of chronic illness. If you have one, you can do something. You can take a probiotic. So even before you get that appointment that gives you the prescription to get ABA or whatever, you can start looking for the things that look like they might be wrong. Trust your instincts. Get Casey Means' book, Good Energy, and read it. Have you read the book yet? Okay, I'll give you a copy of that one. Find out why the environment is the single most important thing. And believe genes are not destiny. This is not something that's hardwired. This is something you can change, because health is fluid. It's a wave, not a snapshot. But you have to think about it differently than the way they're telling you to think about it now. Neurodevelopmental, hardwired. We really don't know that. God, err on the side of hope versus the side of despair for families. And in other countries, the despair is real and the denial is real because it's lifelong, they're intellectually disabled. All these things are things that aren't necessarily, and I think really rarely so. Most of the kids that are being labeled intellectually disabled are being labeled that way because they can't speak. This is motor, not intelligence. If they can't say the words, it doesn't mean the words aren't in there. And the spellers now who started out spelling but are now typing are raising the red flag big time, saying, look, not only are we in here, but we're way smarter than you. And we're tired of being relegated to the corner of a classroom and not taught anything. So the insurrection of the nonverbal is only just beginning. But again, ASHA, American Speech and Hearing, and other people, the establishment, are saying, no, those kids aren't really speaking. They're not really in there. You got to, as Steve Jobs said a long time ago in one of his best speeches, don't be trapped by dogma. Believe what you believe about your kid. Believe in your kid and the ability for your kid to find his way through to a better life. Whatever that looks like, no judgment. But you can't just dismiss the intelligence of someone because they can't speak. We seem to accept that Stephen Hawking was brilliant, but we can't accept that a 6-year-old who doesn't speak might be brilliant because we've never seen them speak, right? So all these things it's a hall of mirrors right now in the autism world. And my job and the job of all the people who come into this room with me is to look at it differently.
I was actually a guest speaker at the Brain Foundation, and I think Ms. Famila mentioned nonverbal does not mean non-thinking, so that really aligns with your point. And my final question is, what message would you like to share to our audience regarding the future of autism advocacy and the importance of collective action in supporting individuals with autism and their families?
I think that the activists who are already speaking, who have a voice right now, are going to suddenly find competition with the non-speakers. The non-speakers who are starting to speak out about being relegated to the profound end of the spectrum. I think that policy will make it that no one who's never spoken with an autism diagnosis should be able to go on throughout their lifetime without getting the opportunity to spell. Even if the parents say, no, they're really not in there, I know they're not in there. I don't think that's the parent's choice to make. I think the individual needs to be given every opportunity to communicate about their wants and needs. And if there's any way they can do that, we need to give them that option. I also think every single child has to be worked up biologically, no matter what, because only when we all contribute to that data set will every child be helped. This is where the community advocacy, it goes beyond the individual. It's the individual, the care teams, the clinicians, the researchers. If we all start looking at the same way, open source data sets, running algorithms, sharing what we find out cross-silo. We're already having epileptologists and GI people coming here because it's not one thing. It's not a behavioral, it's not just psychiatric. It's not just the behaviorists and the psychologists who should be in the room. It's all of these multidisciplinary people given the same data set, the same tools, working together to find answers for every single person. That's the only way, and that's what you were talking about earlier, scalability, ultimate, permanent scalability. And the iPhone and the other ubiquitous tech tools are the things we want to write on existing infrastructure. We don't want to ever have everybody have to go out and buy some weird helmet. We want things that everybody's already using, and technology, in addition to being unstoppable, also continues to get cheaper and better. Love that. The opposite of medicine. Cheaper and better, faster, and let the community have a voice, one voice that says every person in our community counts. Not just the high-functioning ones who can log, every person. Those are the people with seizures and the people with GI disease and the people who are sellers, and everyone's part of the community. I hate the way everyone's getting segmented. It's not going to serve us to do that. Stand together.
So that's all for today, folks. Miss Elizabeth, thank you so much for providing me with your valuable time. It was a great pleasure meeting you.
Great pleasure meeting you, Rob.
And to our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in today. We will return with another Changemaker soon. And until then, take care of yourself and remember, inclusion leads to innovation. Peace out.